What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 7 sleeper picks.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you some of my top DFS sleeper picks, super low priced and low ownership players that could crush value this week and give your lineup an advantage over the field. These are risky plays, meant for large tournaments only. Don't go all in on any of these guys. They are high risk, high reward picks. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, NFL Week 7. We have an extra long sleeper picks video for you here today. So let's get into it. At the quarterback position, one of my sleeper picks is Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers playing the Washington football team, who have the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers has averaged 20.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2.3 rush attempts per game, although he had 7 rush attempts last game, and Aaron Rodgers is only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 21.6 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's $7,500 DraftKings salary, $400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Green Bay Packers favored by 8. So I know why Aaron Rodgers, why his ownership is so low, because for only $900 more, you can get Patrick Mahomes, and for $400 less, you can get Matthew Stafford. But I think Aaron Rodgers is the best play on the slate this week. At only 2% ownership, he could possibly be a slate breaker while everyone piles into Patrick Mahomes and Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, that game could be a blowout versus the Detroit Lions. They're projected to be ahead by 16.5 points in that one, so that could turn into a running game script. Now, Patrick Mahomes, that's a great play this week. I'm going to have plenty of Patrick Mahomes in my lineups, but in the off chance that Patrick Mahomes is a bust, I think Aaron Rodgers could be a sneaky sleeper pick here, a guy that can put up 3+ touchdowns, 300 yards pretty easily, and he scored 24 fantasy points in each of the last 3 games, so he's been super consistent. Now he's got a fantastic matchup, and it's a relatively close game within a touchdown here. So I like Aaron Rodgers here versus the Washington football team. Okay, another sleeper pick is Ryan Tannehill from the Tennessee Titans playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill has averaged 17.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.2 rush attempts per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 19.9 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's $6,400 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. Now, Vegas thinks there's going to be 57.5 points scored in this game, with the Tennessee Titans trailing by 4.5. So this is a super high-scoring game, a fantastic matchup, and a passing game script. So I think Ryan Tannehill is going to have a ton of opportunity in this game. He's going to be throwing a ton of pass attempts at only 2% ownership, and you save a little bit of salary here. So I like Ryan Tannehill here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, another sleeper pick that I like is Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Matt Ryan has averaged 20 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 1.4 rush attempts per game. He's only going to be about 4% owned, projected at 18.9 fantasy points here in Week 7, and he's only $5,700 DraftKings salary, $1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Atlanta Falcons ahead by 2, favored by 2. So this is a great matchup, relatively high scoring game here. So if you're looking for a low salary quarterback that's got a good matchup and it's got some pretty big upside, I like Matt Ryan. He scored 25, 29, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he gets Calvin Ridley back this week. So I like Matt Ryan here versus the Miami Dolphins.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So this guy's not a super sleeper pick, but I do think his ownership is just a bit low. I like Cordell Patterson from the Atlanta Falcons playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Cordell Patterson has averaged 20.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.2 rush attempts per game and 6.2 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 5% owned, projected at 14.9 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's $6,300 DraftKings salary, $1,700 more on FanDuel, so I prefer that DraftKings price. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Falcons favored by 2. So Cordell Patterson, he's more of a wide receiver who can run the ball, although last game he did get 14 rush attempts and 9 pass targets. Now they are getting Calvin Ridley back, so that may eat into his target share or his usage rate a little bit, but this guy's super explosive. He scored 18, 35, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Cordell Patterson here versus the Miami Dolphins. Okay, now a sleeper pick at the running back position. I like James Conner from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Houston Texans, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. James Conner, he's averaged 10.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 13.2 rush attempts per game, and he gets about 1 pass target per game. He's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 11.9 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's only $5,600 DraftKings salary, $900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Arizona Cardinals favored by 17.5. So you got a great matchup here, and this game will probably turn into a running game script. So James Conner got 16 rush attempts and 1 pass target last game. Now he only turned that into 8 fantasy points, but he could have a lot of opportunity here versus a bad run defense. So I like James Conner here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, another sleeper pick at the running back position is J.D. McKissic from the Washington football team playing the Green Bay Packers, who have a pretty good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. J.D. McKissic has averaged 10.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.2 rush attempts per game and 4.7 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 3% owned, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here in week 7. He's 5,000 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Washington football team trailing by 8. So J.D. McKissic, he got 8 rush attempts last game, but he got 10 pass targets, scored 19 fantasy points. So it's the passing game that makes J.D. McKissic interesting as a fantasy player. And if he's going to get 5 to 10 pass targets and 5 to 10 rush attempts, you're looking at 10 to 20 touches at only 5,000 DraftKings salary. And this game probably is going to be a passing game script for the Washington football team. So you're probably going to see J.D. McKissic catching the ball out of the backfield quite a bit this game. So I like J.D. McKissic here versus the Green Bay Packers. Okay, another sleeper pick. If you want to save a ton of salary here, take a look at Devonta Freeman from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing running backs. Now, Devonta Freeman, he hasn't played much so far this season, but he got 9 rush attempts last game, 2 pass targets, scored 11 fantasy points. Now he's going to be the starting running back for the Baltimore Ravens. So he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 8.8 fantasy points here in week 7. And he's only 4,400 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46 points scored in this game, with the Ravens favored by 6.5. So I think this is kind of a dart throw. If you want a low salary, high risk, high reward running back, I think Devonta Freeman is interesting here. I think he's going to get somewhere between 10 to 15 touches this game. Now, they also have Le'Veon Bell on the roster, who's going to share the load a little bit, but it looks like Devonta Freeman is going to be the starting running back. So I like Devonta Freeman here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Julio Jones from the Tennessee Titans playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the second worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Julio Jones has averaged 11.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.8 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 64% of the snaps. He's going to be about 2% owned, projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in week 7. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 57.5 points scored in this game, with the Tennessee Titans trailing by 4.5. So it's a pretty decent matchup here. Super high scoring game. This is a great game to stack, and a passing game script. Now, Julio Jones, he's been injured for a little while, and he came back last week. He got 5 pass targets, scored 9 fantasy points. So he's questionable going into this game, but it looks like he was limited in practice Friday, so he's going to be good to go. I think he's going to have a pretty big role in this game and get a ton of pass targets. So I like Julio Jones here versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Another sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Henry Ruggs from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they're pretty good versus opposing wide receivers, Henry Ruggs has averaged 13.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.3 pass targets per game, and he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 11 fantasy points here in week 7. He's 5,500 DraftKings salary, only 200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 2.5. So Henry Ruggs, he's a big play guy. He scored 19 fantasy points last week off of 4 pass targets. So I think he's a pretty good sleeper pick here. He's got a big ceiling. So I like Henry Ruggs here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, another sleeper pick is Christian Kirk from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Houston Texans, who have the 6th worst defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing wide receivers, Christian Kirk has averaged 14 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.2 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in week 7. He's 5,300 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Now we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Arizona Cardinals favored by 17.5. So Christian Kirk got 8 pass targets last game, put up 19 fantasy points. And I like this pick because his salary is pretty low. You're getting him at low ownership. And although I do think the Arizona Cardinals are going to jump ahead of the Houston Texans, if those points come from a Christian Kirk touchdown, then he's going to hit value pretty quick. So I like Christian Kirk here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, and just real quick, I'm not going to go over these guys' stats, but I just want to throw them out there. Their ownership is a little bit higher than I like, or at least this guy's is. Take a look at Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans. He's only going to be about 6% owned, and the Arizona Cardinals give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I think Brandon Cooks is going to be a target monster in this game. He got 13 targets last week, had 18 fantasy points. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 500 more on FanDuel. So I just think that ownership is a little bit low on Brandon Cooks, who's in a good matchup in a passing game script. So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, and my last 2 sleeper picks here at the wide receiver position. It's a toss-up between Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder from the New York Jets playing the New England Patriots, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. They're both right around the same salary, averaging the same fantasy points per game, about 14 fantasy points per game, getting about 7 to 8 pass targets per game, about 7.3 pass targets per game between the two of them. And Corey Davis is going to be about 2% owned. Jamison Crowder's only going to be about 1% owned. Corey Davis is 5,200 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Jamison Crowder is 4,900 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Jamison Crowder, he got 6 pass targets last game for 8 fantasy points. Corey Davis, 7 pass targets last game for 9 fantasy points. Now, Vegas thinks this game is going to have 42.5 points scored in this game, with the Jets trailing by 7. So it should be a passing game script for the Jets. I wouldn't play both these guys in a lineup. I'm leaning towards Jamison Crowder at 4,900 DraftKings salary, but maybe Corey Davis on FanDuel. So I like these 2 guys. If you want to flip a coin and pick one of these guys as a wide receiver sleeper pick to fill out your lineup, I like Corey Davis or Jamison Crowder here versus the New England Patriots. Okay, let's take a look at the tight end position. My tight end sleeper pick is Hunter Henry from the New England Patriots playing the New York Jets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Hunter Henry has averaged 10.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.7 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 71% of the snaps. He's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 10.3 fantasy points here in week 7. He's 4,100 DraftKings salary, 1,600 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game, with the Patriots favored by 7. So good tight end matchup here. Hunter Henry has scored 11, 20, and 13 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Hunter Henry here versus the New York Jets. Okay, now I prefer Hunter Henry over this next sleeper pick, but I think this is an interesting play here. Take a look at Zach Ertz from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Houston Texans, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Zach Ertz has averaged 8.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 3% owned, projected at 8.7 fantasy points here in week 7. He's 3,900 DraftKings salary, 1,400 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Cardinals favored by 17.5. So Zach Ertz, he's with a new team here, so we don't know how he's going to be used, how much usage he's going to get. So it's a real dice roll here. He's a big question mark going into week 7, but the matchup is fantastic. His salary's low, his ownership's low, so he could be worth a dart throw pick here, maybe play him in one lineup. So I think Zach Ertz is pretty interesting here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, and another sleeper pick at the tight end position, super low salary pick here. I like Hayden Hurst from the Atlanta Falcons playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the 2nd worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Hayden Hurst has averaged 5.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3 pass targets per game. Now, he's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 6.3 fantasy points here in week 7. But I like this pick because he's only 2,700 DraftKings salary. He's 2,100 more on FanDuel, but he got 5 pass targets last week, scored 13 fantasy points, and he got 4 pass targets the week before that, put up 7 fantasy points. So now I know they're getting Calvin Ridley back, so that might eat into his target share a little bit, but he doesn't need much to hit value at only 2,700 DraftKings salary. So one 10-yard touchdown pass to Hayden Hurst will get you there. So I like Hayden Hurst here versus the Miami Dolphins.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.